I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know there was another way.
I know there's no excuse for what I did, but I want you all to know that I'm ready for whatever punishment you think is fair.
See, that's all you had to do, Diamond Tiara. Anything to make that reformation feel genuine. Anyway, Sunset, Shimmer, and Starlight Glimmer. Two characters that had some nice screen time with character building and exciting moments of strength toward their opposition. One more exciting for most than others. So, where do I stand on the whole comparison between Sunset and the once described as Sunset 2.0? Well, last year we had Season 5 and Friendship Games, and I have to say I actually solidified my fourth favorite character. And knowing me, it's pretty obvious that that character is Starlight Glimmer. Now, why this is such a big deal comes from the fact that I made a whole video describing how critical I am when it comes to reformation. So how can I like a character that is considered to have the worst reformation story so bad that some viewers won't even watch episodes centered around her? Well, after an existential crisis through song, which I will not subject you to, but if you really want, there's a link in the description, or just click the annotation, I figured out why this reformation didn't work for me, yet this one did. And the best way to explain it is by looking at the character who got the treatment first. Just like my Diamond Tiara vs. Pacifica video, I'm showing more how there is a lack of comparison between these two, looking at how they are written as completely different characters. Now, I have had a tendency to be very entertained by deemed to be unlikable characters before, not just from MLP. So, I'm not here to tell you who's better character this time. Just provide reasons why it is acceptable to like this character, or even both. No, not like that! Now, believe it or not, I was actually introduced to Sunset Shimmer early on as a fan of the show, as the movie was one of the first things I saw, and it didn't ruin my liking for the show. In fact, it enhanced it by displaying beautifully how each of the characters work off of each other. Except one. I don't think I'm saying anything new here when it comes to Sunset as a villain of the movie. But was Starlight a worse villain? Sunset had the villainous goal of taking over Equestria with her own army, that again, people have already pointed out how ridiculous that is and how she was doomed to fail anyway. Starlight did not have this goal. The end result wasn't Equestria for herself, it was just to find her own happiness in her insecurities and delusions. Yes, I fully admit she is extremely flawed with an insane philosophy destined to fail, but that is what makes her interesting to me. How far is a character willing to go to keep their optimal reality? It's the biggest reason I loved her character as a villain, but just being a weak villain is usually not enough to spurn hatred toward a character. So let's dive into the reason most people grew hatred toward Starlight Glimmer. Her backstory. A backstory full of sympathy, whoa, and how she lost her friend, gave up making friends entirely, and went crazy with the hatred of cutie marks. Jeez, her heartwarming tail counterpart had a better backstory. Yeah, this is a pretty weak backstory for a character's motivation. So, did I just ignore it in my praise for the character? Actually, no. I'll tell you why this backstory works with one simple question. In all seasons of the show, how many villains did we get to see their side of their backstory? Not antagonists, villains. The answer, 1. No other villains in the show have given reasons as to why they live this villainous life. Now, I keep emphasizing show because most of you are probably yelling at me that we know Sunset's backstory from the comics and how great it is. And that's exactly right. For Sunset's backstory, you are encouraged to go out of your way to read up on it, and the payoff is worth it. Doing all that for Starlight's would be frustrating to read, which is why it's in the show, so you don't need to go out of your way to learn it, because it's not worth the effort. MLP has shown villains don't need to give their whole backstory to be great. So while she may not be the best villain, there is still a lot to invest in her character. I feel her backstory is supposed to be ridiculous, as we see no one but Twilight takes it seriously, not even herself, and I feel Twilight is just being sympathetic here because she sees how pathetic Starlight is. A backstory gives the audience insight into why a character is the way they are. She freaks out over one small misstep in her life and focuses solely on finding the perfect magic to rid that inconvenience in her life. So it explains why after the next small misstep, she devotes her time to solely studying magic for ridding that inconvenience. This is why Starlight can match Twilight. Not only is this the first time we're seeing Twilight fight an enemy on her own with just her magic and not that of 4 alicorns, but she is facing an enemy who's determined to be 5 steps ahead of her. Every other villain, including Sunset, has approached our heroines with the feeling of being better than them, being too powerful to be defeated. And in truth, they are, as Twilight always needs the combined effort of her friends to stop them. Starlight's goal was never to defeat Twilight in combat, so it would make sense to devote more of her ability toward evasive tactics and planning ahead to achieve her real goal of merely just altering the timeline through any means necessary, because she planned for Twilight to be there stopping her. So how do you defeat an enemy that's already planning ahead your every move? You don't move, but you talk to her and play into her insecurities. So when it comes to Twilight sparking the reformative turn, Starlight also had the advantage of making the decision on her own terms. When Sunset's defeated, she's rendered completely powerless, so of course there's no other option than to beg for mercy. Starlight, meanwhile, still had the power to rip the spell to defy her opponent, but she doesn't, making her turn a lot more satisfying when it comes out of her own free will. However, this is where most people also become frustrated with Starlight's reformation compared to Sunset. Sunset's not only punished for the destruction she caused, but is forced to stay in the powerless world, and must now struggle to gain everyone's trust back after taking advantage of them. Starlight, while accepting of a punishment, was not punished and let go scot-free, just becoming good friends with her enemies, and just given the best of time through a musical montage. So why wasn't Starlight punished? Why doesn't she need to work for Pony's trust? Why are these writers so lazy with this character? First off, there's actually no reason to punish her. You punish people because you don't want them to act out of place again, because you don't know what they're gonna do next. Twilight knows exactly where Starlight's coming from, and knows exactly what insecurities to play toward to keep Starlight under control. This is why she's treated differently compared to, say, Discord, who also chose reformation himself, but our heroines are still wary of his every move. Why? Well, he is the embodiment of chaos, whose goal has been to use manipulation to again take over Equestria. They don't know if he's playing them for the long run, because he could easily turn back at any time when they're at their most vulnerable. Starlight's goal had nothing to do with taking over Equestria, so what advantage would she have for going against them? Oh no, she was never good. She was just tricking us so she could steal our cutie marks again and force us to be equal friends, even though we've agreed to do that for some time and have shown she has no fear in us feeling better than her. So what's the payoff here? And besides, Sunset also received the other 5 as fast friends. They were even the first ones to be manipulated, and that was without equestrian magic. When it comes to earning people's trust back, Sunset suffered and was greatly rewarded in the end for saving everyone from the sirens, showing that she really does care, fulfilling her character arc. Ponies in Equestria are capable of holding grudges, but the only other ponies affected by Starlight were back in the town. Still, according to this montage, she also gains their trust easily, so there is no suffering. How do you know that, though? We see her meet these 4, but she's not parading around the rest of the town receiving acceptance. For all we know, after she left, the conversation could have been,
"So, do you really think she is reformed?"
Maybe, but what do we care? I just didn't want her to come back here later with revenge for thinking we didn't forgive her.
yeah, as long as she stays far away from here, she can do whatever she wants. Now you just know this show is going to defy me once again with a trip back there in a later episode. But the point is that she does not have to stay with them. Twilight's whole lesson was that she doesn't need to be tied to one friend or one set of friends. There are ponies all over Equestria to reach out to and become friends with, no matter your differences. Being back in Ponyville, Twilight also has the ability to watch over and guide her, because she still has magic, something she did not have to worry about with Sunset Shimmer. Still, it does make Sunset's character better, because not only is she able to handle her reformation completely drained of power, but when she does obtain it, she first helps her new friends to defeat the Dazzlings, and later acquires her own magic to use for good to save everyone, which is something that would also have people swaying towards Sunset, as Starlight has yet to prove herself useful post-reformation. Sorry, Crystalline, that's not gonna cut it. But I'm still holding out for the day. I just hope you can see why both of these reformations were a lot easier to handle than Diamond Tiara's. Both would have been terrible villains, entertaining for what they were, but not for the long run, because one was just blandly written and the other following a philosophy so insane it was doomed to fail. The backstories didn't come out of nowhere, and while you may argue Starlight's terrible backstory was just as bad as the spoiled rich backstory of Sympathy, Starlight was not given as much screen time as Diamond Tiara to develop too much of her antagonistic character that any backstory could have worked. It could have been her mother was eaten by a shark and had an equal sign cutie mark, and now she devotes her life to honoring her mother. That's just as insane! But probably the best reason their reformation worked is that they acknowledged and accepted their mistakes in the past and overcame their insecurities. I'm still waiting for that Diamond Tiara. Don't just stand in the background making pies. Go confront your friend of her time in need. Get some screen time. Your mother has had more screen time this season. Sorry. Sunset Shimmer and Starlight Glimmer are different characters, each written and handled well, and while you can certainly like one more than the other, neither should be completely written off, because in terms of reformation, while both have had similar obstacles to overcome, neither have dealt with them the same way, and there are still so many opportunities to continue their stories and develop their characters. The same cannot be said for you! Come on, writers, give me my Reformed Diamond Tiara episode!